Good morning. I'm Kyle Hernandez of the UWM Alumni Association. Welcome to our mobile master chat. We are thrilled to have alumni from across the country join us today to hear from Dr. Ilya Avdeev. Dr. Avdeev has been an associate professor of mechanical engineering at UWM since 2009. He is also the director of innovation and Kellner Entrepreneurship Fellow at the Lubar Entrepreneurship Center. As one of the center's co-creators and architects, he leads campus-wide efforts to expand learning opportunities for students around innovation and entrepreneurship. As a principal investigator, Dr. Avdeev leads the NSF I-Core site of Southeastern Wisconsin and the NSF Research Experience for Teachers site at UWM. Dr. Avdeev teaches engineering design and human-centered design at UWM and has been an adjunct instructor for numerous design thinking courses and workshops at the Medical College of Wisconsin and Stanford University's D-School Teaching and Learning Studio. Since 2009, Dr. Avdeev has been a PI on over 30 funded research and educational projects. His research focuses on mathematical modeling of multi-scale and real-time complex systems. I will join you again at the end of the chat for questions, but now I'll turn it over to Dr. Avdeev.
Thank you, Kyle, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to join our alumni in this talk, and it's even more pleasure to actually be on campus at the Lubar Entrepreneurship Center. It's been a year of being hunkered down in the basement of my house with the kids running upstairs, and it's really nice to go back to campus. We're hoping that all of our students will come back in the fall and have like a full experience. Kyle, you seen the sharing of the screen, the presentation?
Yes, you are good to go.
Okay, fantastic. So I will share with you all actually three very simple ideas, but extremely powerful, and the ideas that help us create Lubar Entrepreneurship Center the way it is, and why they're important we think they're important for the future of this campus and maybe for the future of higher education. And they have to do with experiential learning. I will try to convince you that they're important, but you will definitely appreciate the simplicity of these three ideas. And I'm glad that you are here on the call because you're all experts in experiential learning. And if you think about experiential learning, you're perhaps thinking of learning how to fish with your father as a kid. You don't read a textbook about it. Your father just takes you on a boat and go fishing, and this is how you do it. And there are many other similar type of experiences that we all have. And I'm actually having the joy of having two little kids in my house right now, one who is 1 year old and one who is 3 years old. And I can observe how they learn in sort of like an environment which is outside of the schooling environment. And what I'm noticing is that they learn through experience. So this is, for example, this is not exactly a picture of my daughter, but this is something that she does all the time. She's learning how to speak. And when she asks for more, she uses the sign language. I want more. And of course, she kind of learned it, by interacting with people at the daycare. They kind of showed that, like, if you want more food, use this sign. And she tried it, and it worked. She got more food. But then she actually applied the same concept to other things. So, for example, if she has good time playing, and my wife tickles her or doing something else which is fun for her, she uses the same language. So she created this sort of like she reflected on this and probably subconsciously, and realized that this sign can be used in many other situations, and she tested them, and it turned out to be true. I'll give you another example of experiential learning at the very early age. So this is actually me and my son Leo, who is 3 years old, and this is that last winter. So Leo watched me skiing, and he thought, oh, okay, that's cool. So now let me participate in this activity. So he was pushing me. He didn't have skis on. And after that, he thought, okay, so this is time for me to kind of like take it on. He reflected on his experience on the slope, and he decided that the best time to try is on a flat surface in front of the house, and it seemed to be working great. So Leo thought that, well, perhaps, I can actually take it to the next level. And, maybe if I put a helmet on and goggles and the same skis, then I can be just like that. So Leo proceeded to test this hypothesis. And that's actually my daughter, who is using the sign language above, who is not interested in skiing whatsoever. And needless to say, the lesson that Leo learned was that life is much better without skis. He wasn't able to, really flourish on skis. He's only 3 years old. But these two examples kind of illustrate this, what we call, or what researchers in the field of cognition and learning call a natural cycle of learning. And it starts always with concrete experience. It's something that you, through action, through doing something, you get some sensory input. You either doing something with your hands, or building something, or participating in an activity where your whole body is engaged, or maybe you're just watching something or reading something and you're getting stimulation through your visual cortex and through your ears. And after that, another part of the brain turns on that does reflective observation. You try to connect what you just experienced with what you already know and some of the prior knowledge that you have. And you also try to integrate that with your prior knowledge and decide that, oh, perhaps, I can do something else with this experience. And you build some hypothesis or some abstract concept in your head, like, for example, when you brainstorm, you build an idea. And all of it is abstract. It's all in your head. It doesn't exist in the world, right? It's only, within the synopsis of your brain. So what do you do next? You actually actively testing this idea. So in case of design and brainstorming, you put this idea on a post-it, write it down. So now it's a physical thing, or maybe you prototype it. Like Leo, he just tested his concept of wearing a helmet and goggles and skis on a slope. And this is called a natural cycle of learning. And the reason I called you all experts in experiential learning, because it's always starts with experience, with the action of doing something and sensory input. But most importantly, your brain is hardwired for this kind of learning. So this cycle actually fits perfectly to the structure of your brain. So you have different parts of your brain dedicated to these 4 key activities: the experience, the reflection, abstract and hypothesis generation, and then active testing. And it seems natural to learn something. Even toddlers and infants and newborns, without any kinds of schooling, they're able to learn things on their own through using this natural cycle. So I hope I convinced you that you're experts in experiential learning, and I'm sure you can all come up with all kinds of examples of something you learned last week, last month, without any textbook, without any professor, without any school, without any credit. So then you go to university and you notice that the same method is used in research. The scientific method is actually very closely mimics the natural cycle of learning. And it kind of makes sense because research is learning about the world. It's trying to understand and make connections, right? Based on some phenomena that we can observe and sense. So there's a place for natural cycle at the university. Somehow, when you go to the classroom at the university, and you can pick any university anywhere in the world, and you go to a random classroom, most likely than not, it will look like this. You will see a lot of students sitting and looking at the professor at the top of the classroom, writing something down, talking about something, and students just passively absorbing the information, taking notes, and then they go and do something else later. So this is, as you can imagine, is completely not aligned with the natural cycle of learning. and it's not experiential. Well, you can argue that there's experience here, that students are sitting and actually listening and watching something, but it's not the same experience that is driven by doing something, by action. So action is motivating all of the parts of the cycle to flare up. And actually, there was a lot of studies done with a functional MRI that showed how these parts of the brain activate during these parts of learning process. And with the passive learning that we kind of like developed and designed many, many years ago at the higher education, also at our K-12 schooling, is not promoting this kind of learning. And it's not even clear that this learning is effective. And you can actually argue, and there's a lot of studies done that shows that students learn despite the system that we set up for them to learn, not because of it. So in this talk, I'll try to avoid talking about why it happened, the reasons. You can definitely get a lot of opinions on that, and watch some fantastic talks by Ken Robinson and others on the topic why our educational system the way it is. But I would rather talk about something that we tried to do about it and how we decided to sort of shift this paradigm of how students learn at UWM and how can they learn different. So I joined UWM in 2009. So I'm going to take you back on a very short sort of like a flashback to the past, to 2012. It's almost 10 years ago, and it's crazy how fast the time flies. So 10 years ago, me and my colleague Nathaniel Stern, we were teaching a course. We're still teaching this course. It's called Product Realization. It's a collaborative course between engineering students and art students, where they design some engineering solutions for that address certain problems. And when we were in the course, we were kind of imposing the projects. They were industry sponsored. We were imposing the process. We were teaching engineering design. Later on, we started teaching human-centered design in conjunction with engineering design. But what we started hearing from our students is, well, yeah, industry-sponsored projects are great, but we would like to work on something that we care about. And for the first time in a long time, we kind of like sat down and thought, well, students are telling us something. Maybe we should listen to them. So we proposed, well, first we identified this need that the engineering students, and we started with the engineering students because they were the most vocal and they were closer to us. But eventually it spread to all of the students at UWM. They really craved this implementation of their creative ideas. They really wanted to do something on their own, which means they had some ideas, they had some hypotheses, they wanted to act on them. They wanted to test those hypotheses. They wanted to reflect on them. So they wanted to actually engage in a natural experiential learning and not being constrained by the way that we were teaching. And we thought that, okay, they were talking about their own inventions, they're talking about their products that they want to build, their own 3D printers, their own Lego cubes that talk to each other. This is some amazing ideas that didn't exist as products. And it all sounded like entrepreneurial activities. Like it sounded like they would, need to found some type of organization, a startup or something that would help them, understand who would need those products, what problems they would solve, and then how to design them in a way that addresses those needs. So these are all practical entrepreneurial activities. So we proposed almost 10 years ago this tech startup hub pilot, which luckily got funded by the College of Engineering and Applied Science. It was a small grant, $50,000, but that allowed us to test these ideas. And again, we were actually also engaged in a natural cycle of learning by creating this program because it was extracurricular. It was not part of any curriculum. We didn't know what we were doing. But we were really interested in trying these things. We had some hypotheses that, we just let students run with their ideas, and we use our course as the vehicle, as the mechanism for them to realize these ideas. So the students with these creative ideas would be the industry sponsors for other students in our course. So it was like this big sort of aha moment that we had. And that was the beginning of the Student Startup Challenge that is now in the 8th year. And, hundreds of student entrepreneurs actually went through this process and launched companies and did amazing things. And what's interesting, I was looking at this presentation yesterday. I found it in my email inbox, from 9 years ago. And I see one bullet point there that is long-term goal. We need UWM Entrepreneurship Center. So that was 9 years ago. And I thought to myself, wow, this is like, it's been 9 years. It seems like we just started it. And it's an amazing sort of flashback. So let me take you to now. So we started this idea that we needed a space, not just a space, but a place on campus for students, faculty, and everybody else to use the natural cycle of learning and have these experiential learning opportunities somewhere on campus, which we couldn't find anywhere else outside of maybe a few, sort of pockets of creativity or people trying to do something, and learn through experience. We wanted to have this hub that would sort of centralize all of this and amplify things that are done by amazing faculty already in Peck School of Arts, architecture, and others, but also reimagine the whole university and what we can do with this notion of experiential learning. So we started working, and by we, I mean, it was a group of faculty and visionaries like Brian Thompson, president of UWM Research Foundation, Nathaniel Stern. It started with the Chancellor Mike Lovell, and then Chancellor Mark Money taking the lead on this and actually bringing it over the finish line. And it was a long process of developing this vision and realizing it into the Lubar Entrepreneurship Center, which is now, a real thing. And I'm actually in this center right now. And I want to welcome you all. When you can, please come and visit us, especially in the fall where, you will see a lot of student activity here. Of course, it wouldn't exist without the support of the founders, the Lubar family. They were the first ones to recognize the importance of entrepreneurial thinking, which is basically one of the sides of the coin of experiential learning. If you think about any entrepreneur, any founder of multi-billion tech companies or small businesses, they didn't learn how to start those companies by reading textbooks. They were learning by doing it. They were actually started very small and going through this evolution of the idea, they were able to learn and they were able to pivot and progress. So they were going through this testing loop and reflection and doing this all over again. So we are grateful to their support and their gift of 10 million plus now dollars that help actually launch this center. And of course, the state, matched the funds with building the building, and others like Kellner family, Jerry Gendusa family, and others were able to support this. And many other alumni who can still contribute to the success of the center and the students. So grand opening was 2 years ago. And a year ago, we had to close the doors and switch to virtual. And I'll talk in this presentation about what we had to learn quickly to make the transition. And now we're transitioning back, so we have to relearn how to teach face-to-face as well. So just a very quick note of what we do at the Lubar Entrepreneurship Center. So the campus is about 25,000 students, and we think that our mission is to unlock creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurial thinking of every student. It doesn't mean that every student has to launch a company, but it means that every student will have tools and confidence to realize their potential, whether, going through engineering courses or nursing, or doing whatever they want. But we want to make sure that they're fully engaged and realized in what they're trying to do and what they're trying to achieve. So we have like three-pronged approach here. So the programming that we do is all experiential based. So there's no lectures. For students, we support students through scholarships. So we encourage them to actually, continue their studying and making sure that they're finishing the school on time. And then we have a lot of workshops that we call pop-up workshops, where we can create a curriculum which is outside of the catalog, focused on specific topics of innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship. And we can sprinkle that curriculum across any unit on campus, because Lubar Entrepreneurship Center does not belong to any college. We are sort of like a Switzerland, a neutral ground for everyone to come and play with us and with each other. University Innovation Fellows is a program that encourages students to change higher education, so kind of focus their creativity on the school itself. Then we support faculty through Teaching Fellows Grant Program and Curriculum Innovation Award. Again, we will support you. And finally, we have programs, experiential programs in entrepreneurship, which are Startup Challenge and Nsfi core program. I'll show you two case studies that kind of illustrate how these programs work. And of course, we have amazing people like entrepreneurs in residence that's supporting the founders, and an array and a spectrum of programs focused on social innovation and diverse ideas, something that's really important for stakeholders and different communities on campus. The pop-up classes, thousands of students every year experience these concepts in a hands-on way. And we use design thinking, we use lean startup as kind of like the tools of delivering these concepts to students. We have 36 LEC teaching fellows. These are all faculty. So think about the multiplying effect. 36 faculty teaching thousands of students. So whatever ideas they have is amplified by a factor of 10 to 100. The NSFI core program is a program that is funded by the National Science Foundation, and it's supporting researchers, faculty, postdocs, graduate students, undergraduate students in finding the broad impact of their research and their discoveries in the lab. And it's doing it by teaching faculty how to become founders, how to find that broad impact of their technologies. And the way to find that broad impact might be through commercialization, through licensing of the idea, or maybe through creating a startup. 32 startups were funded in the last 6 years through this program, something that we didn't really expect would happen, because it's not something that faculty were kind of like built to do. They were built to teach, research, provide service, but not necessarily fund the company. And yet it is so natural because it's experiential learning. The faculty learn, the researchers learn about application of their research to the market, to the broader society. Of course, this is all done by work of amazing people at the Lubar Entrepreneurship Center, my colleagues, and entrepreneurs in residence, interns, faculty, staff. It takes a village to create something like this. So we are a very small team, but we are very dedicated to what we are trying to do. So now I want to give you 3 examples that illustrates the 3 big ideas, which are very simple, but I think they're at the core of what we are trying to do. So the first example would be 2 physics professors, Maria Gardazinska-Józefowska and Carol Hirschmogel, who are amazing, accomplished physicists at UW-Milwaukee. Maria is actually also a dean of graduate school, so very busy, very accomplished researchers, faculty, spending a lot of time in the lab, and they found an amazing material. They found a way to produce a solid carbon monoxide layers of material, and they patented that technology through the UWM Research Foundation. And then the question was, what are the applications of this solid carbon monoxide? what can you do with it? So they engaged with us through this experiential learning program called iCore, or Innovation Core, funded by the National Science Foundation. And in the program, we basically ask them this question: what problem this material would solve and for whom? So there's a lot of guesses initially. There's a lot of hypotheses on what is this technology, what problem it can solve. And to test those hypotheses, to go through that action testing part of the learning cycle, we ask them to go outside of their lab and actually talk to potential customers. So Maria and Carol did go outside the lab, and they talked to more than 500 potential customers. And when we say customers, we don't mean just people of the street trying to just like, oh, well, how would you use carbon monoxide? We're talking about companies, because the technology has a potential to completely transform lithium-ion battery energy storage marketplace. The technology would allow higher capacities of batteries and longer state of health of the batteries. So they had to go and talk to managers and engineers at Tesla, Apple, other companies on the West Coast, everybody and anybody who's using lithium-ion batteries, Samsung, manufacturers of the lithium-ion batteries. So 500 plus interviews of customers trying to understand their problems and trying to see if there is a match. And they were able to find this perfect spot where their technology would be very, very useful. And it would be in a few very niche applications like drones and a few others. That would be a good start. But then the next problem is, how do you scale this material? They found a way to make it in a very tiny scale, micrograms, nanograms, really small amount of material in the lab. But in order for it to be used in the industry, you have to produce tons of this material. So Maria and Carol launched the company in 2016, and it used to be called Safely. Now it has a different name, Conovate. And if you Google Conovate, you will find so much news about them in the last 4 years, because they actually realized that just finding that application is not enough. You have to make it happen. So they launched the company, and they started working diligently on raising money, partnering with organizations and experts in the field of energy storage and manufacturing in order to find a way to scale up the production of the material and make it happen. One of the latest development is that they partnered with the Argonne National Lab that will actually help them manufacture a large quantity of this material that can be piloted in a commercial application. They recently raised some funding from the angel investors. They received a lot of seed funding from the National Science Foundation, Department of Energy. So in 4 years, they went from physicists to full-blown entrepreneurs without taking any courses, without reading any textbooks, all through experiential learning. And it was very important that they actually use reflection and hypothesis generation parts of the learning cycle that a lot of time we overlook. So just doing something and repeating it is not learning. You really have to go back and reflect on what you learn and tie it up. And the iCore process is kind of structured in a way that captures their hypothesis and what they learn in this business model canvas, sort of a way of making your learning visible and making sure that you're actually learning something. So an amazing story of faculty researchers continuing on this journey and really realizing how challenging it is and how learning can be applied to funding a company. Carol is actually retiring this year. She's a CEO of the company now, and she wants to do it full time, and she's fully committed to this process. The way they got introduced to all of this experiential learning was through our 4-week program at iCore that we run 3 times a year for faculty at UWM, Medical College, Marquette, MSU, and Concordia. And it's 4 weeks, 40 customer interviews, and we use these 3 big ideas. The business model generation is how you frame your hypothesis that kind of explains the canvas. And then the other two parts is how you talk to humans and the mom test. How do you ask a question that even your mother will not lie to you? Because we rely so heavily on customer interviews and understanding the problems. There's so many biases in what you're hearing in you and your customers. So it's very important to ask the right questions. Otherwise, your hypothesis will not be tested the right way. We treat actually these interviews as experiments themselves. Another example I want to give you is Lindsay Roddy, who is a PhD nursing student who launched a company called Roddy Medical. And that's another amazing example of a student who is learning nursing. And nursing is a very experiential kind of learning environment. Lindsay is a nurse practitioner. She has a lot of clinical experience. And the first time we met Lindsay, she came to our Student Startup Challenge program a few years ago with this sort of problem, not an idea, but a problem that if you're in a intensive care unit and someone is recovering from a surgery or a health event, they're usually connected to a lot of tubes, medical tubes, all kinds of medication and tracking is happening on the patient. And managing that cluster of tubes is a problem. And on top of that, it actually one of the leading causes for errors, because tubes get unplugged at the wrong time, or nurses, mix the wrong tubes in the wrong spots. And there's another problem with that, is that it restricts the mobility of the patient. And what we know about recovery is that mobility is one of the leading sort of accelerators of recovery process. So you want patients to be walking as soon as possible. And when you're all entangled in these tubes, it's virtually impossible. So Lindsay came up with this need. Well, she didn't come up with it, she actually recognized it. She came up with an idea that there got to be some device that allows to organize these tubes, something that can be attached to the bed that can really sort of make it super easy and untangled. So she started working on this, kind of like idea through Student Startup Challenge, through our I-Core program, through our product realization course. She conducted more than 300 customer interviews. She went through iterations of designs. She launched her company, Roddy Medical. And she, prototyped, she actually tested her ideas. And that's experiential learning, using just, a tape and a cup, just like see what can be done on a bed. And eventually she came up with this array of different devices, but more importantly, through this experience of interviewing the customers and bringing her ideas from abstract to concrete through prototyping, she realized that it's more important to have that device attached to the bed. It's more important to be walk with the patient. So mobility of the device is more important than having it being part of the bed structure. And that was a huge aha moment. And Lindsay is flourishing. So you see Kyle Jensen here, who is director of engineering in her startup. Lindsay is the CEO of your Roddy Medical, as well as being a PhD nursing student. But they're together actually raising money right now to build the first working production prototypes that they can clinically test. And the third example I'll give you is actually something that hits really close to home, and not just me as a professor at the university or the instructor, but it hits everyone who's teaching at the university. So we had, when pandemic hit, the world and the university, we had to switch from face-to-face teaching, which was very key to everything we were doing, because it was experiential. We could not really deliver everything online, to doing it online, fully online. So we had to learn how to do that. And we had to go from, something that is like super engaging, high energy, stimulating all of the senses of participants, to something that happens just like now, you're looking at the screen. So we actually didn't have any courses that we could take. We didn't have any textbooks on how to switch from face-to-face to online learning. So it all had to happen experientially. And my personal journey of learning is through my partnerships with colleagues at the Stanford D School and my colleagues at the Lubar Entrepreneurship Center and Medical College of Wisconsin. We started trying things. We, created a couple of hackathons. We tried some workshops online, and we basically started testing our hypothesis of what can be done. How can you teach experiential learning? Or how can you facilitate experiential learning online? What tools do you need? What problems will happen? But more importantly, is there something that online can do better than face-to-face, something that we couldn't do before? So through these experiments, and it was a process, it started last summer for both of our iCore and Startup Challenge and all of our workshops and courses. And it continued through the fall, and in the spring, we actually felt like we know what we are doing. But we, for example, use Mural as a platform to collaborative creative work. Think of it as a virtual whiteboard that is accessible to anyone on the team 24/7, where people can brainstorm, prototype in a very engaging environment. And this is an example how we mapped our iCore program into this Mural environment, and it was phenomenal. It's working. It's going to be so hard actually to go back to face-to-face after we experienced this. We were able, in the past, we would draw a lot of our ideas on the whiteboard and take snapshots of them. And now we can capture them on Mural and digitize them and preserve the knowledge, and it's searchable. It's so much better than doing it on the whiteboard, even though we're missing that element of creativity that comes with writing on the whiteboard. We can see the patterns in the interview notes that our participants take when they interview customers. It's just a phenomenal tool for synthesizing knowledge, and for experiential learning, we'll probably keep it in addition to what we do face-to-face. Zoom, well, it's annoying. We all have Zoom fatigue, but there are some things that are all about Zoom. So in our iCore program, we had 150 teams that went through 40 customer interviews each, so more than 6,000 interviews. And in the past, we required them to do face-to-face interviews, write the interview notes, make sure that hypotheses were tested. So it's a lot of work. And Zoom now allows to record your interview and do automatic transcription. So a lot of that work that is not very creative and takes away time from actually thinking and learning, put that work into the tool and capture that data. Absolutely phenomenal. So it's going to be hard again to go back to face-to-face interviewing and capturing that data. Survey, things like getting feedback of participants, again, digitizing it made it so much easier for us to understand what we're doing right and where do we need to pivot. So let me bring you to three big ideas that I talked about in these three examples in our philosophy at the Lubar Entrepreneurship Center, but I think it's worth kind of flesh it out. So the first big idea is experiential learning is aligned with your natural learning cycle. Sitting in a lecture, listening to someone preaching in front of the classroom is not natural, and most likely you're not learning anything. You think that you're learning, but you actually are not. So if we could switch to experiential learning everywhere, anywhere, at any time, we would do it because our brains are hardwired for experiential learning. The second big idea is when you get to use experiential learning, don't use it to teach about something or learning about something. It's much better to learning to become somebody. So for example, with our students, we don't teach them about innovation. We don't teach them about entrepreneurship. We don't teach them about design or design thinking. We want them to become entrepreneurs. We want them to become innovators. We want them to become design thinkers. And that requires a different type of experiential learning. It requires different type of skill building, mindset building, than just learning about something. So, but that learning is so much deeper and so much better if you become somebody, if you become an engineer, if you become a nurse, rather than learning about engineering, learning about nursing. And the last one is really hits hard with the faculty and instructors, that what is our role in the experiential learning? And our role is not to be in front of the students. Our role is to be on the side. So we become more like a coach. Even amazing athletes like Michael Jordan had an amazing coach, Phil Jackson. You would think, why would Michael Jordan need a coach, right? He's the greatest of all time, arguably. But no, you always need a coach, even if you're the greatest, but not someone who tells you what to do, but rather keeps you in that space where you need to be to learn. So Michael Jordan was learning the game throughout his whole career. And no matter how accomplished we are or try to be, we always learning, we always learning. And it's very easy to drift away into the part where you're not learning. You actually get excited about doing something, you go in there and it's fun. And that's where the teacher comes in and helps you, calibrate you, and bring you back to the space where you actually can learn, but not teach you, but be there to guide you through your learning journey. So now that we think about the future and we're going back, going back to face-to-face learning, we still have this big ambition at the Lubar Entrepreneurship Center of how might we reimagine the future of UWM, that we can harness the power of experiential learning. What can we do beyond the walls of the Lubar Entrepreneurship Center? How can we support the rest of the campus and the community around the university, the city of Milwaukee, state of Wisconsin, our country, the world, with these big ideas that we have and the experiences that we have? Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Avdeev. Thank you for that talk. Incredible to find out about experiential learning effects on faculty research, teaching methods, and also student entrepreneurship, as well as student learning. So many great things to learn about. Thank you so much. We have a few questions from registration, and how are the results from your research impacting the common traditional learning throughout a student's experience?
That's a very good question. There's actually a lot mixed into it. So we are learning that students get they get a lot of content learning in their traditional coursework. They get a lot of learning of skills and the mindset through their research experiences, through their internships and like real experiences that they have while they're at school. And what we are trying to do is, and they kind of being like in parallel, there's these two parallel tracks that they kind of run in every student's life. They have this content learning in the classroom, and they have this like really skill learning through, either apprenticeship at the company or apprenticeship at the research, or, like learning by doing research or working somewhere. And what we are trying to do, we're trying to merge those. So initially we started with entrepreneurial experience being a parallel track, and it's great. It's still running. The Student Startup Challenge is this great parallel track, but it's hard to scale. So that's our approach now, to work with the faculty and see how faculty have student time, right? They have a luxury of having students in the course for a semester or more. So how can we leverage that? The fact that the students are already there, and the students are there to absorb some content, but what if they actually experience something in the class in addition to absorbing content? So, and that experience create perhaps content that is very different for each student. So it becomes more personalized learning. Every student will have their own journey, but it's also allowing them to learn through experience in the course. So our goal now is to activate as many faculty, activate is this sort of like a jargon we use, but change the curriculum, tweak it. And that's what our LEC teaching fellows are doing right now. 30 faculty are working on tweaking their curriculum and make it more experiential. I hope that helped.
Excellent, thanks. We have a question in the chat from Mir Shams. She asks, at which stage of education do you think experiential learning will be most effective?
I would say I'm a believer in a lifelong learning. So I think it's effective at any stage. It's clearly super effective at young kids. And Mir is my former graduate student. Mir, it's great that you're on the call. And it's actually, after you graduate from college, that's the only kind of learning that most of us are doing, right? We are not going back to school, with a few exceptions. Maybe some occasional professional development opportunities, but we learn by doing our job. You know, we're learning to be parents. We don't go to school to become parents. So I think we primed at any time of our life to do that.
And have you seen a difference between young students in Montessori style schools versus the traditional teaching styles?
Only anecdotal differences. I haven't looked at research. I've experienced a little bit of Waldorf school with my older daughter, who is 16 now, and she's in a public school right now. But when she was very little, she went to Waldorf school for a little bit. And I could definitely see the differences in approach. I believe there's a ton of research done showing how amazing it is and how, you know, it's my belief it's more experiential. Another interesting also parallel here is my older daughter. She's a violinist, and she was learning to play violin using Suzuki method, which is sort of like experiential. You know, don't spend a lot of time learning the notation, but rather playing. So I can see that it works.
Excellent. And who of the groups you're working with, i.e. students, professors, have given the most resistance to these ideas? No names.
That's a loaded question. Most resistance.
Perhaps in like certain areas of study.
Yeah, I think that the two kind of comes to mind. Our hypothesis was that it will be the most resistance, and actually one played out completely not to be, another one is still remain to be seen. Two very similar areas, engineering and nursing. The similarity is that they're very kind of professional kind of education. You know, you're really focused on creating a practicing engineer and a practicing nurse, right? So. Which means that the program of education is very, very rich with content, and it's also very rigorous. And there's no space to really change something. At least it appears that way. And what we learn now is that College of Nursing is redesigning the entire PhD and DNP graduate program of nursing, make it more design thinking, entrepreneurial thinking, through like the catalyst faculty that work there, Aknil Talsma, Gina Holt, the dean, and other amazing faculty. And we are hoping to do the same thing with engineering. And engineering is my home. And the resistance is not because they don't like the ideas, but because they're so busy, students and faculty. And it's really hard to free up this time. You know, there's this notion of creative procrastination, or you know, you need that time for, you know, for things to happen. Even when we say that, you know, any experiential learning starts with some kind of action that creates sensory input, it's important not to actually guide that action. It's important to give students space to find that action for themselves, because it will lead to different learning for them, not something that we say. And there's just no space in the curriculum for that. So that's been resistance, but it's not the resistance of humans, it's resistance of the system, the way it's, the DNA of the system needs to be reprogrammed.
And thank you for that. So you mentioned space as a figurative idea. Can you talk about the actual physical space and the design of the Lubar Entrepreneurship Center, how that came about, and also how that space can help with the creative process?
So that was a journey that's, we can write a book about it with a lot of creative people, stakeholders participating and figuring out what do we build from scratch. So we basically had an opportunity to build a brand new building, but we didn't want it to be just a building. We wanted to be actually a toolkit for faculty and students, so it can be used as a lever. It's like lever for learning. And we had this one of the examples I'll give you is this discussion about creating an atrium. So it's a 2-story building, and it has, if you walk into a building, there's a welcome center if you enter from Maryland Avenue, and then you enter this big atrium space, that connects first and the second floor. There's a staircase, and there's a balcony all around. So, and there are the spaces like design studios above and some touchdown spaces. So you can actually stand on the first floor, look up, and you can basically have a conversation with anyone in the building. If you design in a home with little kids, that's not how to do it, because there's no place to escape. But it makes everything super connected, right? And when we so this idea we actually borrowed from our dear friends at Stanford, who went through 5 iterations of the design school space, and eventually they landed in a building that had that atrium kind of thing. And we could see it in action. We could see how it can be used for all kinds of programming and how it can be leveraged. In our case, we also wanted to show the students who just walk into the first floor, because maybe they're going to the coffee shop, or maybe they're going to the welcome center. And then on the second floor, we have, startup challenge students, I-Core faculty, kind of like they're already in the program, they're doing something. But we wanted for students on the first floor to not have that barrier that's like, the entrepreneurship is unattainable goal, So we wanted to show how close it is and connect them. So we proposed to have an atrium to the architects, and immediately the reaction was, but you're going to lose the precious square footage on the second floor. What are you doing? This is a premium real estate on campus. You cannot do that. So we had to actually show them how it's much more important to lose that square footage, but have that leverage and use the space as a tool to connect, activate, and it's all with the mind of experiential learning. We don't have classrooms in this building. We have the learning environments, learning studios, and they can be reconfigured for every particular workshop or a class, but they're not designed for lectures. So every instructor has to be intentional how they set the space, and that's done on purpose. So we want the space to support learning, not play against it.
That's an amazing summation, and we invite and hope everyone can join us in the Lubar Entrepreneurship Center. Come visit UWM in the fall. It's also the Welcome Center, the coffee shop. Come see the space. Come see what Dr. Avdeev, where he works, and come to hope we can welcome you all to campus in the fall. Thank you so much, Dr. Avdeev. Such an interesting presentation today, and thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Kyle.